I'm playing around at the moment trying to figure out how I get this new Arrow crank into my Riley 9 block. So because the bearings on this are fixed, there's two main bearings. This is the rear and the front is in this cover. You have to get the crankshaft into the engine block through this hole in the front. And this is a modern crank. This is what the original looked like, and you can see it's pretty much flat and it's smaller. The journals are smaller and all sorts of things. This is what I guess 90 years of modern technology gets you to. So this is a modern counterbalanced crank. It's all hardened and all that kind of business as well. The problem is this is a little bit too big to fit through the hole. So what I need to do is relieve this hole here just enough for the counterbalance and the crank webs to fit through the hole. And I have got pictures from someone who's done this before, and I can sort of see whereabouts those cutouts need to be. There's one on each side. You can sort of see in there's a cutout. So I can figure out where they need to go. And to figure out how deep they need to be, what I've been doing is I take the front cover, which has got the front bearing on it, and that circular flange is what locates it into the block. That's a nice sort of push fit into there, and then of course all those studs hold it. So what I've been doing is very carefully sliding the front cover onto the crank, and then I can use a straight edge across the webs like that, and you can see the gaps there, and I can see exactly how much bigger I need to relieve the block. So it's a bit tricky with one hand, but if you imagine that's there, and then I use my incredibly handy little inch ruler that has 4 different scales on it, marked from 64, 32, 16 and 1/8 of an inch markings. And so I was able to hold the straight edge along here and then use this to figure out approximately what that gap is. And of course you can do the same on the other side. So I know I need to relieve the block here. It's between 1/16 of an inch or 3/32. So it's not much, but you can see it's not going to leave much around some of these studs. So you have to position where the cutouts go to minimize the weakening. I don't think it's actually a problem because these studs are just holding this front cover that just pulls it tight onto the block. So if it's a little bit thinner next to one of these, I don't think it's going to matter too much. So the next thing to do will be mark on here exactly where I need to grind out, and then I'm going to use carbide bits. I'll try just on the Dremel because I want to go very slowly and carefully and see if I can relieve the bits that I need. I'm going to make sure this is really well covered, of course, because you don't want ground cast iron getting into the new white metal bearings, which is what these are. These have been machined and machined to the right diameter to fit the new crank, and also line bored, because obviously you need them to be completely parallel. I don't think I'm going to do that today. That'll be a job for another day, but that's how I figured out exactly how much bigger it needs to be to get this to drop through here to fit into there. Often you can sort of wiggle them around, but that's not going to work on this too much because you have to, once it gets a certain distance in, you can only go vertically because it's going to go into that bushing. So you don't have any wiggle room. It's just going to go straight up and down. The other thing I really need to do is, it's a bit hard to see, these bores do still have the original hone marks on them, but there's also a little tiny bit of surface rust. It's really not bad, but I do have somewhere up here one of these ball hones, and I'll just probably run it through that, run that through the bores just to clean them up nicely. And once I have the crank assembled in the block, I can loosely put the rods in and the pistons in and just make sure everything rotates. And then because the rods are longer, I'm going to have to look at getting the tops of the pistons machined, because they're going to come further up in the block here, and you need to machine relief on them rather, so the valves, which are at 45 degrees in the head, don't bash into them. So first thing to do though is get this into there. Once I've got this in here and I know everything rotates, I'm going to take all the rotating parts, so this and the flywheel and clutch parts, which is what this is, off to be balanced. The crankshaft is already balanced, so that shouldn't really need much doing to it, but I imagine the flywheel, because it's been machined, is probably going to need some balancing on this. But first I have to get the crank into the block. So this is interesting. I've turned the block upside down just so I could match it to the photos better to figure out where the reliefs are cut in. And I just realized that the number 4 cylinder here has been sleeved. You can see the bottom of the sleeve sticking out there. None of the other 3 have been. They all look original. I don't know if this is necessarily a bad thing or not. Probably not. I think it's a standard thing to do on older engines. But given this is the best block I've got, the only other one I've got is my test assembly one there, and I have no idea what condition that's in, and I don't really want to have to get the bearings and all that sort of stuff done again. I guess I'm going to have to run with this one. I've been waiting a while to make this last little bit of this film, and this is actually the second time I've filmed it. The first time I was a little bit miffed, so I decided I should go back and redo it once I'd calmed down a little bit, and I'll show you why in a second. But I've been waiting for these wheels and tyres for a very, very long time, so I was really looking forward to getting them finally. The wheels were sent off down to Christchurch to be rebuilt sometime before the last lockdown in New Zealand, which was March last year. And obviously with the COVIDs and stuff, it took a while for these to be done. The original rims were all shot, they were just rusted through. So these wheels have been rebuilt with brand new rims and brand new spokes, but I'm reusing the original Riley hubs. So that was all done, the wheels were painted, then we had to wait for the tyres to come from the UK. Obviously everything's taking a lot longer these days to get shipped around. That was all finally done just around Christmas time. I was away, so we waited until the new year before sending these up. So they were shipped from Christchurch to Wellington using Owens, who are part of Main Freight, I believe. You wouldn't think that should take so long, but it took over a week, I think. And for some strange reason, the package ended up going via Napier, which, if you're in New Zealand, you'll understand that doesn't really make any sense. So they finally were ready to deliver it. I've been waiting days and days and days, watching their tracking. The tracking on the Main Freight website is rubbish, basically. Countdown, who do my online grocery shopping, have way better tracking than a freight company, which is ridiculous. So the tracking doesn't really tell you anything. That's how I knew they were in Napier, though. I rang up yesterday to find out, well, where are they? They've been in transit for days now. And I got told, oh, they'll be on the delivery van tomorrow, meaning today, Tuesday, and they'll be delivered then. So I said to them, well, I'm going to be in at the office on Tuesday. I'm not going to be home. So can you deliver them on Wednesday? And they said, sure, they'd do that. Go into work today, get a text from the courier saying, I'm going to drop your wheels off in 45 minutes. I need someone to be there to help me unload them. So I had to Uber home in a hurry to be here for the courier. The courier driver was nice, so that was good. It wasn't her fault at all. Finally got the wheels, which had been packed onto a little half pallet there, and they'd been wrapped in plastic and strapped down with steel strapping, and there was sort of cardboard between the wheels, but they were all stacked on top of each other. And unfortunately, they are damaged. So this is the one that was on top. That one's pretty good. A little bit of scraping here where the steel strap went through. This one you can start seeing the damage. The paint has been chipped off a lot of the spokes, and the spokes themselves, if you look on this one, have actually been bent. So I'm not really too pleased about this. We're trying to figure out what to do. I don't want to send them away to anyone else again because it's just a pain in the neck and very expensive. I can straighten the spokes. I don't think that's a big deal. And the paint is 2-pack paint. Thankfully they weren't powder coated. That would be really hard to repair if it's damaged like this. So I think what I'm going to be able to do is touch up the paint somehow. But it's just so disappointing, especially when it's taken, 10 months? It's cost me something like, I think for the wheels and the tyres and all the shipping backwards and forwards and things like that, $4,500 New Zealand dollars. And to get them and them being damaged like this, it was just very, very frustrating. So I'm still deciding what to do. I'm still talking to all the people involved. I think, honestly, there should be some compensation for this because you don't pay that much money for a not perfect product, to be honest. And it would have just taken a little bit of care to prevent that happening. So I think what I'll do is wait a little bit before I do anything. I need to read through the fine print on the shipping note, and it really is fine print. I mean, I can't read that without a magnifying glass. Yeah, it's pretty hard. But pretty much I think they're going to say, well, it's up to the person who packaged it. So I'm sort of talking to him at the moment. I'm not going to name any names because he did do a good job building the wheels and he's been okay to deal with, and it's been a very long time. So, I'm not too angry at them. I still think their packaging should have been better. But I'm sure it's all fixable. What I'll do is I might just put these up next to the car. I don't have the hubs on there. The hubs are down there, so they'll need painting and new studs put in them, and then I can actually start looking at fitting some of these things. But I'll stand the wheels up next to the car and we can see what they look like. Okay, those are just very precariously balanced because I don't have any hubs in place, but the chassis is actually sitting pretty much at the height it needs to be at. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it's going to look like with the wheels in place. I can't really get back far enough for it to look right, but yeah, something like that. Yeah, I still need to figure out what I'm going to do about these wheels. The other thing is I didn't actually want them black. I wanted them to be silver originally, and they painted them the wrong color. So yeah. One other thing I've done is I took the little GPS unit out for a really good test. We went for a drive basically over the hill over to the Wairarapa, in the weekend. So I basically duct taped the little GPS unit here to this little suction cup camera adapter-y thing, and was able to stick it to the windscreen of the MG, and took that out for a good test, and it works really well. It's actually very accurate, which is what you'd expect with GPS. Even the cheap ones are more than accurate for speed. So what I'm doing now in my little paint oven is I made up a little metal plate there with the appropriate screw. It's actually a Whitworth thread screw, interestingly enough. It's one of the places where Whitworth threads are still actually used, which is on these camera body screw threads. So I soldered a nut to a little piece of brass, and then I'm going to stick that to the back of the case here, probably with some I was going to try the 3M command adhesive pads, which should be strong enough. If that's not strong enough, I'll get some VHB tape and use that. That'll stick it. And then I can either use it in the MG by sticking it to the windscreen, or I should be able to use it in the Austin by just suction cupping it to the body, and I don't think that's going to come off. The one last thing I need to do on this still is the little number plate lights, and I did order some from a place, I can't remember exactly what it's called, an online place, but they seem to be messing me around as well. You have to pay by PayPal, which I did, and the order on the website just never got updated. So I contacted them and they said, oh, okay, yeah, we'll check, and said, oh yeah, I can see the payment, we'll update the order now. And nothing's happened since for over a week. So screw them, I'm going to reverse the PayPal payment. I've emailed them and I haven't heard back, so I'm going to reverse that. And I've just ordered some cheap ones for now, which will be enough to get the car done, and I can sort out trying to get it registered finally. I still haven't worked out exactly how I'm going to do modify this to fit the crank in. I actually emailed the Arrow people, the people who make the cranks, but they don't have any details about how you actually fit it into the block. So I've also emailed the suppliers. I'll just see what they say. They may have some instructions or some advice. But I think it's one of these things where I just kind of have to jump in and do it. I know what it needs to do. I know how it needs to fit. I can pretty much work out where the best place to remove material from is going to be. It's going to leave it fairly thin around some of these two of the studs, I think. But there's enough meat there that the studs aren't going to come out, and they're not under stress or anything. Once that front cover is bolted on there, it's pulled in tight, it's not going to go anywhere, hopefully. It's actually held by this ring here, so I think that will be okay. Other things I need to do, I still have this set up in the mill. You can see I've got the little wobbler in there now to get the center so that I can mill a slot in these pins. This is my test one to fit into the rear tube. They still need a little bit of a clean out with a little flat wheel. And if that works, then I'm going to use this as my test piece. Turn this down so it's a nice tight fit, lots of Loctite, then it's drilled and pinned, and effectively the pins act like big rivets. They rivet it through. I have heard of people welding them as well. Maybe I'll do that, although I like the idea of the pins being removable if they ever need to come out. But I mean, honestly, this is hard steel, and it's going to be in a shackle with brass bushes, so the shackles are going to wear way before the pins do. And are they likely to wear in the amount of time I'm going to be spending with this car? Probably not. So that's another job to do. And I still want to cut out a blank of aluminium and just start playing on the English wheel, just because I really need the practice. I've got lots of aluminium there. Might as well practice and see if I can reproduce this shape. Just mainly for something to do. So, slow progress at the moment. And just to cap off a crappy, disappointing day, my soldering iron stopped working. My good old faithful Weller now isn't heating. So, yeah, something else to fix. Annoying.